Well, thank you for bringing yourselves here and for arriving just as you are. And today we're going to reflect a little on the space of connection and the wisdom of the natural world. But first, I'd like to guide us in practice. And so, for those of you who are new to the Dharma Sunday, hi, everybody online too. We've got a group there as well. Um, we begin with practice. So, we're going to start off with a practice that will be maybe guided practice, half hour, 40 minutes. And if you're new to sitting practice, in the middle there, if you're feeling really restless, you can stand and stretch and breathe and then sit again. If you're really new to it, it can feel like a lot to sit still for that long. So we start with the meditation practice and then we will take a little break, about 15 minutes, just to stretch and walk and get a cup of tea, and then we'll reconvene here for the teaching. And then after the teaching, opening it to all of you for some Q&A. That gives you a sense of the arc of the morning. So let's begin with a practice that will be about settling and coming present. But also a practice that is a subtle way of dissolving that sense of separateness that we carry with us. So we'll start by just taking one mindful breath. We're going to do 3 mindful breaths, but even just to take one mindful breath is an opening. So just feeling the air drawing in to our lungs, sensing that cool, fresh quality of the inhale. And a slow, deep exhale, feeling the warm, soft quality of the exhale. And then resting in the space between. So let's take a few breaths like that, just following the inhale, all the little sensations in the nostrils and the lungs. And following the exhale, feeling that sense of relief and release as the air flows out into the world. That letting go. Scientists say that just one mindful exhale, being present on the exhale, resets your whole parasympathetic nervous system to a relaxation response. Just noticing how that is when you exhale, that natural reset. And letting your attention move down the body, float down the body to where your seat meets or the chair. And notice it down there at the base of the body. You are so deeply connected to the earth, choicelessly. So, this body, earth upon earth. How you are already stable and grounded. Just by virtue of your body's deep friendliness to the earth. And allow that stable body to ground your restless mind. And from that place of groundedness, coming back home to the breath where we began. And this time, as you breathe, filling your whole body with the inhale, not just your lungs, but filling the whole body with breath on the inhale. And exhaling breath from the whole body into the world. Breathing through the whole body. Inhaling the oxygen exhaled by the trees. Exhaling the carbon dioxide released by your cells. Food for the trees. Inhaling the love from the warm hearts around the world that are radiating kindness, radiating love at this moment. Inhaling that love into your own body. And exhaling what needs to be released. Stress, fear, agitation. Inhaling this communal air that we all breathe. Plants breathe. The animals breathe. Our neighbors breathe. Co-breathing with all of the natural world. Now letting go of intentionality and just letting the breath breathe you. Natural breath. at ease with whatever's happening right here, right now. Just like the breath is flowing, the thoughts are flowing. And the sounds are flowing. That's the natural flow of experience. And can you sit like a yogi on the side of a river, just watching the flow? The thoughts like leaves floating down the river. We'll end our meditation with the syllable ah, which is kind of like the om of the Tibetan tradition. You know how in yoga classes you end with om, we end with ah. And we'll take a little break, 15 minutes. The meditation hall remains a zone of noble silence so that people can have if they want to stay and practice a little, but outside, feel free to connect. See you at 11. Sanjay Chedan Sojin Chonam La Jang Chu Bardu Dani Chap Su Chi Daki Jin So Chi Pe So Nam Chi Rola Pinjir Sanjay Drupal. We're on page 1. Sanjay Chudan Sochi Chonam La Changshu Bardu Dani Chapsu Chi Daki Jinso Chi Pe Sonam Ji Drola Penshir Sanjay Drupal Sanjay Chudan Sochi Chonam La Changshu Partu Dani Chapsu Chi Daki Chenso Chi Pe Sonam Chi Rola Pinjir Sanjay Drupal. So lovely to see everyone here in person at Wonderwell, and we can now see you all online. Hello and welcome to Wonderwell. And I'm delighted to be here to reflect on mycelial wisdom with all of you, to reflect, explore, consider. And this is one of a series of 4 talks that I'm giving over 4 months. And the topic, mycelial wisdom, is extending out of an exploration that I am engaged in at the moment. Can people hear me? How's it going in the hall? Better? Okay. Louder? Okay. All right. an exploration of my relationship with the plant world and how that connects to the Dharma and spiritual practice, because I've been finding in my own exploration of my relationship with the mycelial network. I'll say a little bit more about what that is for people that weren't here last month for that teaching. I've been discovering, to my surprise, and not entirely surprised, but to my delight, that the plant world is teaching what the Buddha taught in many ways. It's the same wisdom. It's just coming through a way that I haven't known how to receive it exactly before. Although I think, yes, been receiving all my life, and some of you, many of you, been receiving all your lives, but maybe not framed it as I'm receiving the teachings from the plant world. Right? I think when we're children, most of us gravitate to the plant world in this really natural way. Children are drawn to the soil. I remember being 3 and getting my hand, seeing my own hands in the soil, and then fishing around in the soil, finding an earthworm and putting it into my mouth. There's that part of it too, right? We knew as children that we were connected to the natural world, and maybe that was a relationship that you had. I was remembering my own relationship with potted plants when I was a kid. I was very attached to my potted plants, and they all had names, and I attributed to them personalities. And I spent hours nurturing them every week. And on Saturdays would play classical music for 2 hours to my plants while I watered them and touched them and sang to them. So, and no one told me to do that. That was my own idea as a kid. And I'm sure you have equivalent experiences that you can remember from your past, maybe a relationship with a tree that you loved or used to climb, a relationship with a plant in your backyard, or maybe one of your parents' potted plants inside. There was also a peyote button in my plant collection, and I didn't really understand the significance of it at the time. Much later, I understood the significance of it. It had come from a friend of my mother's who was living in the Southwest. So lately, I've been exploring my relationship to the plant world and to mycelium. And so I started to research a little, read more about mycelium, what mycelium are, and I'm going to use a definition from Paul Stamets, who's a fungi specialist. His definition is mycelium is the neurological network of nature, which I think is a really beautiful encapsulation of what mycelium are. So mycelium are part of a network under the soil, and the fruiting bodies of mycelium are all the fungi that we see around us, the mushrooms, the hen of the woods, the fungi growing from trunks, from between the cracks and rocks. And when we see those mushrooms, at least I always thought that when I pulled a mushroom out of the ground, it was just the mushroom until reading about the mycelial network, which is this network of underground organic tentacles that can be, a network can be miles long and wide, huge network, kind of like the network of our own neurological brain, which is all of those ganglion and those synapses, essentially pathways of communication, right? Our brain is a conglomeration of pathways of communication. That's our nervous system. So similarly, the plant world has a nervous system, and it's underneath primarily, not only, but primarily underneath the soil, also growing on trees and rocks. And communication runs along those mycelium pathways. Communication not just between the different fruiting bodies, mushrooms, but also between the trees. The trees use the same network to communicate. And so in looking into that, I realized that what the mycelial network is this vast, hidden, relational, communicative network that is not just one entity, it's a web that is not only an entity, it is an extension of the planet itself, of the living planet itself, the broader network of this living planet. And it also occurred to me in learning about that mycelial network that that network is a metaphor and an embodiment for one of the truths that we land on in the practice of meditation and that the Buddha taught about in his own way, which is the truth of interdependence. That even though we have an idea that there's this one self, this one being that is me, we have a very strong belief in that, me, that actually we're part of a network. Actually, we are a node in a communicative web that, like the mycelial network, is hidden. It is profoundly communicative. It is organic, and it links us to every other living being on the planet. That while we have the idea that we're this isolated being, we're actually a node in that network. And so I wanted to explore this a bit on the cushion in the Dharma hall. And you'll have to forgive me if it's not very polished, because I don't have anybody really to model my reflections after. Because the Buddha never taught about the mycelial network. He didn't talk about the wisdom of fungi per se, but he talked about many things related to this interdependence idea, this interdependent connection idea. So I just am going to try to weave together a little bit. So at the time that the Buddha lived, he lived in India. I'm going to talk about the Buddha for a minute. The Buddha was, for those of you that are more new to Buddhism, an actual person. He was an individual, a human being, not a god, who lived 2,500 years ago, more than that, 2,600 years ago or so, in northern India. And the Buddha was born into this Hindu culture in India, the time that he was living there. And one of the beliefs of that culture was centering around this idea of Atman. Atman, Atman means self, self. And that the practice of meditation, the goal of the practice of meditation was to realize the Atman, to fully unite one's smaller self with the larger self of Atman. And the Buddha had this unique teaching around that. So the Buddha could have taught Atman, right? He could have taught that our goal of our meditation practice is to realize self, to realize maybe the full potential of the self. But instead, what he taught, and in some ways, there's not that much of a difference between the Atman teaching and the Anatman teaching, but still, what he taught as a kind of spin on that and a unique take on that is no, what we're doing is we're meditating to let the self dissolve. So he taught, instead of, we're not trying to reify or make stronger Atman, make the self stronger or more real or more apparent, that what we're actually doing is we're practicing in order to let go of this sense of self and to become free. So how he understood freedom was as this dissolution of self. But of course, then it becomes very important to understand, what did he even mean by self, right? Because he didn't mean we're going to disappear. Somehow through meditation, you're going to disappear and you're no longer going to be on the planet, no self anymore. But what the Buddha taught was not that there's no entity, there's no body here, but that this idea of a self is a construction. It is a series of ideas that we hold on to and that we define ourselves by. So what he encouraged was looking into those ideas. We might say what he said was not that there's no self, but this self is a construction of a lot of different parts that are actually in flow. They're actually in flow. It's not like there's any solid center that we can say, that's myself. And yet, we have a very strong sense of self, don't we? Like we wake up in the morning and we're like, here I am. And there you are. And there's my dog, Luna. My dog's name is Luna. And there's the world, and there's plants outside, and I exist vis-a-vis this world. And some of the world I'm attracted to, I find it interesting and helpful and pleasurable. And some of the world I really don't like. I find it unpleasurable and I want it to go away. And some of the things around me, the things out there, I feel neither attachment towards nor aversion to. I'm just kind of, take it or leave it. I could say I feel apathetic or neutral about other things, right? So based on this idea that we exist, or maybe in interdependence with this idea that we exist, is also that there are threats to our existence, and there are things that are going to help our existence, and there are things that neither help nor harm, that we have a kind of neutral opinion about. And on the basis of that, we experience a lot of complication, right, in our minds about what we like, what we don't like, and what we feel neutral about. And it's a challenging way to live when you think about it. I exist, I'm separate from the world that I live in, and I have to be pretty much on constant alert for what might threaten, now that I believe I exist, what might threaten this organism and what might help it. I have to get more of what might help it and keep away all that might threaten it. And all the fear that entails, all the vigilance, all the distrust, and also sometimes all the trust and all the love and all the attachment too. And based on that, we experience a human life. And the human life has a lot of challenge in it. So the Buddha questioned the very basis of all of that, questioned that, and encouraged his students, his monks at the time, or nuns. He had a community of monastics back then, 2,500 years ago, to just look inside, slow down, look inside and take in the full picture of what's happening in your human experience, like to take it in. I mean, they'd say that was his first step. And he called that investigating dukkha. And dukkha is the Sanskrit word for dissatisfactoriness. So looking into our own dissatisfactoriness with being alive and starting to tease out, what does that really come from? What does that really come from? So he encouraged question the notion of a self as one of the exercises that can help us look into the causes of our suffering. Do we really, not do we exist, but do we exist in the way that we think we do? And he made this proposition that maybe we're not as solid and as separate as we think we are. Maybe we're more connected, and maybe we're more of a flow. And the way that he encouraged his students to look into this, because this was India 2,500 years ago, was to look into how we label anything, like we label a self. He said, well, look at how do you label, he gave the example of a chariot, because back then there were chariots. That was the conveyance of the time. That was the car of the time. You hooked your horses up to this wheeled carriage and you got in it and you went somewhere. It was a very practical, very, good form of transportation. They had the wheel back then in India. They didn't have it everywhere, but they did have the wheel in India. So they were getting around the countryside there on their horses and their chariots. And he suggested, when you look at a chariot, what's the chariot? Is the wheel the chariot? Is the axle the chariot? Is the seat the chariot? Is the harness the chariot? Where is chariot? Making the point that chariot is actually a construction that we all agree exists, but actually it's just this bunch of parts coming together that has a use, has a function, and we all agree we're going to call it chariot, but there's no essence of chariot to the chariot. So we use that as an example of how we are. Like, am I my hand? Am I my foot? Am I my nose? Am I my hair? Am I my personality? Am I my name? Am I my job? You know, taking the things that seem to make us into who we are and beginning to notice all of these things are in flow. If I lose my job, is there still a human here? Oh, there is. If I lose my arm, is there still a human here? Oh, there is. So just noticing that we are so much more a flow than we are an entity. And we're so much more connected than we are separate. So the mycelium exemplify that. They are on the surface. And on the surface, we see them on the surface. They appear as separate. We could see 5 mushrooms. We could see a clump of mushrooms over here and a clump of mushrooms over there. But actually what we're seeing is the fruiting body of this matrix underneath the soil. And similarly, there's a me over here and a Karen over there and a Barbara over here, 2 Barbaras, in fact. But we're just the fruiting bodies of the mycelial network of the planet. We too are the fruiting bodies. And that interconnection, just like the mycelial network is hidden, the interconnection, the oneness is real. But our sense of separation is a belief we have that we have to soften to feel into that realness, that we are one. Not only are we connected, we are one. I mean, that's even another step of understanding. You can understand I'm connected to you, but I'm one with you. I mean, that level of intimacy, that level of dissolution of the boundaries that we hold is a whole other level. But in some ways, that is exactly what we're doing on a spiritual path. We are beginning to feel into the permeability of what it means to be human. And so even in our meditation today, that's what we were doing. The breath is an amazing connector. If we're looking to start to move into permeability, when with every inhale, we are inhaling the exhale of all the trees and the plants around us. We're inhaling the gases that they have exhaled this morning. And with every exhale, we are exhaling our own gases that they will then inhale. So we're living in this communal pool of resources, we might say, of sky, of wind, of air, and we're sharing that. We're not just breathing, we're actually co-breathing. So as you're just even resting on the breath when you're meditating, when you begin to tune into that, it softens that sense of it's just me. With every breath, I am part of the natural world. And with every exhale, I am a member of the animal family and of the plant family, of the human family and the world family, the earth family. So breath can do that for us, can tune us into that permeability. But also, the more deeply, we look into the mind, which is another place we are resting, examining, working with as meditators. Part of our whole slowing down process when we meditate. Why get so still? You know, people often wonder that about meditation. why do you have to be so still? Like, why can't we just do this when we're moving? We can. But there's something about slowing down the nervous system that slows down the thinking mind. And as the thinking mind begins to slow down, we notice there's more to our experience than just thinking. We're so enmeshed in our thoughts and in our beliefs about reality, our beliefs about time, our beliefs about space, our beliefs about our separateness, our beliefs about the I, our beliefs about others, and our belief in our own thinking. I mean, we're very much attached to the thinking, not just having it. We're also like, yeah, this is true. I believe this, whatever it is we're thinking. Of course, it changes in 2 years. We don't believe what we believed then, and we're like, oh no, actually, the older you get, the less you know for sure. Um, so when we slow down, when we stop, when we find stillness, we start to notice that there's so much more to our experience than just thinking. There is space between the thoughts. There are other kinds of knowing. There's intuition. There's body wisdom. There's animal wisdom. So we're not just walking in prefrontal cortexes. We're not just walking brains. We are animals. We are primates. So there's primate wisdom, animal wisdom. And as we start to notice, there's so much more in there, we also begin to notice that we are connected. So much more in here, but also we notice that we are not everything we thought we were. In fact, we're much vaster than we thought we were. So as we slow down like that and begin to practice, we notice mind, this thing that we thought had an edge and had a center, is actually very spacious. And when we try to find the edge, when we do that kind of an investigation, which is hard to do when we're all caught up in the thinking, but if we start to investigate this one, where do they end? And where does the next thing begin? It's really hard to grasp onto that, to find that edge. And we start to wonder, is there an edge? So that comes through that practice of meditating. And mycelium challenges us to think that way as well. Because is there really an edge to the mycelial network? It's tied into something on its edge. It's tied into a river. It's tied into tree roots. It's tied into moisture and the elements. And then where does that go? Another tentacle in the mycelial network. So when I was talking about the challenge of the human condition, one of the challenges, this idea that we are a separate entity and how it stimulates our vigilance and our sense of, I need to protect this separate entity from other entities, and I need to defend it, and I need to grasp the things that will protect it. That kind of thinking that we might say is the self-thinking is based on defensiveness and vigilance. But the mycelial network works on the basis of cooperation and communication. So if you even look at some of the research into how trees communicate through the mycelial network, they warn each other. For example, when there's a predator, like a leaf borer in one of the trees, they send out a kind of warning hormone through the mycelial network to warn another tree this is coming. And that tree can begin to develop a system of protecting itself. It's not that the mycelial network doesn't protect itself, but its main impulse and the way that it works is through this communication and this network of cooperation with the other nodes in that mycelial network. So I think there's something we can learn from that kind of thinking of ourselves not as the entity, but as the web. So if I'm part of the web, how would I behave? If I'm part of the web, how would I speak? And how would I be? How would I embody that connection and that love? So we can take refuge in relationality. And the Buddha taught one of the ways to dismantle our attachment to the separate self is to remember that the self is a construction and to start to notice how we construct it, how we are not just a self, but we're actually engaged in a project of selfing, of recreating and reinforcing the notion of a self. But another strategy that we can work with is remembering our interdependence. Remembering our interdependence. And in Sanskrit, the word for interdependence is pratitya samutpada. And pratitya samutpada means dependent and connected. Dependent and connected. Now, when we hear a word like dependent, we might think, and I would say my old self would think, that's not a good thing. You don't want to be dependent. We grow up in a culture as children where we're taught you need to be independent. But lately, I feel so differently about that now, and especially reading a lot about psych theory, psychology, clinical psychology, and research psychology now says we actually absolutely need to be dependent. Not overly dependent, but not only do we need to be dependent, but we are. Even if we deny that we are dependent on others. We're dependent on others for love, for kindness, for care, and for connection, and for our own survival even. We are, and it's not a bad thing. That dependence is a bad thing is an unfortunate myth. I mean, I think overdependence or codependence is another thing, but just dependence. So reflecting on that dependence is beautiful, and leaning on someone you love is not only okay, it's probably very healthy to learn how to lean. So the first part of that word, patitya, is lean. And what the Buddha meant by that is everything depends on everything else. Everything leans, including us. We too lean, and it's okay to lean. And the more we look into how we lean, we realize I'm not just me alone. I'm me, and I'm also you. And I'm me, and I'm my family. And I'm me and my Sangha. And that all of these beings, we are all leaning on each other, and it's a beautiful thing. It's an embodiment of the mycelial network. To even know that, to even trust that we lean is such a beautiful thing. We might say that community is an expression of the mycelial network, whatever communities, intersecting communities we're a part of. So the first part of that word, pratitya, is dependent. Everything is dependent and everything is samutpada, which means connected. So dependent and connected. Connected meaning whatever you do affects others. So everything leans on everything else and everything affects everything else. So whatever it is that we do or we say or we feel has a reverberation, it has an effect. So there's something quite beautiful to that too, because you're also receiving the signals from other people and that's affecting you. You are part of a flow. And so this, could say the art of breaking down the illusion of our separateness is an art of moving into a world in which we are willing to lean and be someone that is leaned on. And we're also willing to stay in that flow of connection and to explore this idea of who we are as part of that matrix. So taking refuge in relationality. And in meditation, the way we do this dissolution is through just these very subtle ways that we begin to notice. I was noticing it this morning when we were all sitting together. Whatever it is that we're noticing in the moment of meditation, for example, hearing the sound of a bird, what came up in my mind is the sound is not me and it's not me. It's not me, but it's not me. Because the moment you hear it, it is your consciousness, right? It is your consciousness. So there's something about where the space we're invited into in practice or on a spiritual path of beginning to let ourselves relax the boundary of self into I don't know where I end and this world begins. And that's not so much an idea in practice as it is an experience in practice. And I think the plants teach that. They teach that. They are so permeable with their environments. If you look at a plant, any plant, and you watch how it is reaching out and being a part of the world that it is in. And plants don't have a prefrontal cortex. So I would bet they're wiser than we are. Like they know their interdependence from the ground up. And we've sort of interfered with that, with an idea of the self somehow. But this idea that consciousness is a oneness consciousness, when we really get down into it in ourselves, it doesn't know it's a self. there's a part of us that has that wisdom too. And that's what we're practicing with slowly as we meditate. So this wisdom of the plants, it may not be something that we're now tuning into in 2025 or since the 60s. It's something that people have known forever. And there is evidence that our consciousness, our brains evolved in relationship with mycelium. We have receptors in our brain that communicate or that receive the messages from the mycelial network when it's ingested. There are receptors that developed over time. So there were, from a long time ago, entheogens. They're called entheogens in the literature on these psychoactive fungi. Entheogen means a substance that has been used by humans in ritual over many centuries in religion and in ritual and in spiritual practice in order to bring the consciousness to a different state. It's called an entheogen. And they have been around for a very long time, probably forever, since we've been human, probably since we've been human. And in reading about it, there are these ancient Greek paintings of mushrooms on some of these vases, these sacred vases used in Greece. Like they've been around, and their value has been recognized for such a long time. So it's interesting that we've been in communication with those plants for a very, very long time, the human race. And maybe what's happening right now is just that we're remembering that. It's starting to rise for us. So I want to open it up now to you all to reflect on this. I think I've said enough about the mycelial reflections here. And I want to hear what you have to say or thinking or wondering about. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. That was a beautiful, just a wonderful talk. Thank you very much. I was wondering about, so when when human beings like ingest these plant medicines, I was wondering somehow if we're like ingesting the karma of the mycelial network in a way. Like, and that's why we can get in touch with this like deep sense of connection and joy that maybe is what that network is experiencing. But then you mentioned also that our like receptor, like we've co-evolved in a way, like it's not just us kind of taking this or like experiencing the karma, we've actually like evolved in a way to be able to experience that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, that's what some of that research says. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanted to be kind of clear about that and just check with you and see if that's what you were saying or if you had anything else.
I haven't thought of it that way, but I'm also very early in my exploration. So I haven't thought of it that way. Um, what I've, my experience is more like they're trying to communicate with us, like remind us of who we are. That's just my own subjective experience. Yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah. Mm. Oh, someone online. Yeah, let's do room and Zoom. Room and Zoom. We'll go back and forth. Yeah, yeah. Hello.
Hi. Yeah, I'm really excited for some reason about all
What's
this.
your name? Wait, what's your name? I can't see your name there.
Hi, I'm Damon.
Damon?
Yeah,
Okay, hi.
and I was just saying that I'm just feeling very excited and stimulated by all this. And I'm feeling a kind of buzz in the room, even though I'm not there. And um, so I want to know how this mycelial theory might help one like myself overcome a lot of anxiety and fear around mortality, because if I'm just a node, then even after my physical body dies, my energy gets absorbed into the network and I'm sort of immortal in a sense. Or teach me here, tell me, how can I feel more comfortable with death?
You just said it. You said it right there. You said it very well. Um, yeah, as you may know or may not know, right now there's a lot of research on psychoactive psilocybin mushrooms funded by the NIH. I mean, probably all being cut right now, but oh well. But it was happening. Um, and there's a lot of double-blind studies with those long-term studies with those mushrooms that are especially being researched around fear of death and around PTSD. So that particular substance does help with that fear. And it does so through exposing the person who is with, of course, the right setting and the right dosage and the right oversight. I mean, I just want to say that to exposing that person to the mycelial network from within. That is that sense of, oh, have always been a part of this. It's not like I'm just now a part of this. I've always been a part of this and I always will be. And that does tend to help those fears relax. Yeah. So there, if you want to know more about that, I can turn you towards a resource that's really easy to access, even easier than a book, which is this How to Change Your Mind series on Netflix with Michael Pollan, who wrote a book called How to Change Your Mind. And in the Netflix series, they interview people that are on these studies, which is really helpful to actually hear them talk about, especially people facing a terminal illness who then try this and then what happens to them. And these are people that have never, ever done any kind of substance in their life. They're just on this study, on this, NIH funded study on using using psilocybin to help people who are facing the end of their life relax, yeah, and feel less anxious. So you might read that or look at that series, and that would give you some more information. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe Nancy can put that in the chat. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that would be good. Michael Pollan, and How to Change Your Mind. Yeah. And Ruman. Oh, okay.
Thank you so much for talking about this. I've been really connected. When I found out about the Mycelial Network, I was like, this is such an amazing teaching from nature. And Finding the Mother Tree is an incredible book. It shares how, from a scientific perspective, she does so many studies that show that, like, one of the examples from the book is that in the winter, the Douglas fir help the birch trees, and in the summer, the birch trees help the Douglas fir trees. Like they exchange sugar and nutrients, and how, like she shows in the book, how through the mycelial web, a lot of the trees help each other, help sick trees, you know, that they're not just helping their own species, actually, that they do interspecies help. But my question is, I find that there's like a lot of, I'm looking for that in my life. Like I feel like we need to, like the dependence that you spoke about, but then there's still like this really hard thing about interpersonal problems, you know, and like this thing, this label of like toxicity and like, you know, needing to cut people off. And like I just wanted to hear what you had to say about that, because I believe that when people are hurting, they need more love instead of like being cut off.
Right, right. Yeah, I would say, you know, life is complicated, right? We're complicated human beings. As human beings, we are complex creatures. And I love what you said. And I think that leading with love is a very beautiful thing. And there's also things can be complicated, and there are people, there are times when the best of people need to be apart from someone because it isn't good for them to be near them. That happens. It happens. It's happened to me. I can say that. There are times when we have to be apart. It doesn't mean, think for myself, how I hold that is not ever cutting that person off in my heart. I may have to step back for my own health, for my own mental health, may have to step back, but I don't have to close them out of my heart. And so that kind of you can love someone up close, and you can or may need to, or someone may need to from afar at times. I don't know if there's a recipe, one recipe that fits. Yeah, it's hard to see that happen when that happens. It's hard to be in that position. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Oh yeah, room and Zoom. Thank you for helping me. Yeah.
Hi, Lama Willa. Hi, it's Justine.
Hi, Justine.
Hi, thank you for this. And I just wanted to say that I've heard you talk about the Tao Te Ching, the Book of Changes, before, and I find this talk very reminiscent of that. And when you described the hearing the bird, I had this image of my mind of the reflections of the moon over the water. And I I think we need that same lightness with the way we interact with this world, because things are so changing so rapidly in ways that we cannot understand, just because our senses don't work that fast all the time, or they're not sometimes mistaken. So I definitely take that with me from your talk, and thank you.
Thank you, Justine.
Yeah.
Thank you. Glad
Thanks.
you're here.
Subterranean homesick blues.
It's a good song.
I just wanted to add on to your comments about finding the mother tree. Another great resource, if people are interested, is The Secret Life of Trees. And it tells those wonderful stories about how trees can keep stumps alive and how they communicate with each other. It's really a beautiful book.
Secret Life of Trees. We can put that in the chat. And I have two other resources up here. One is a movie. If you want to learn about that whole mycelial network idea and how that manifests and what it's about, there's a movie called Fantastic Fungi, The Magic Beneath Us. It's on Netflix. It's great. It's so, the photography is so beautiful. And then just because this article came out this month, but the promises of some of these substances when ingested in the right context setting and dosage and all of those things are this thing happens, which is a big story. It's out of Emory that psilocybin has been found to actually extend the cellular lifespan of these mice. I mean, it's only in mice right now, but mice are a lot like humans around their cellular behavior. So if that's true, then psilocybin has anti-aging properties that could be significant for the just health benefits, not even for the psychoactive qualities of that mushroom, but just the health benefits of that mushroom. I just found that very cool that it just came out. So I put that up there too. Yeah. Yeah, Anne.
Thank you, Lama Willa. Is there any evidence that shows practitioners in our tradition back in the day in Tibet were using these substances for their practice?
I don't know that there is, but I do know that there is evidence that it was used in India. Something was used in India, something called soma, back in the time of the Rig Veda. And soma appears to have been a psychoactive plant or substance, possibly a mushroom. And that was used in ritual as a way of seeing visions that were helping to unite with Brahma, reunite with God. And it was in a cup. I mean, there are descriptions of it, old descriptions of that. And that tradition does have connections to Buddhism, which has connections to Tibet, but I don't know of any myself. Of that being an ethnogen in Tibet is not something that I have heard, and I have looked into it and I haven't been able to find it. So yeah. Yeah, and online, I know we're a little over, but maybe those of you that need to go here or there, no problem with going, but I'm going to take a couple more questions before we conclude. Yes, online there.
Judith?
Hi, thank you. So I was meditating and had this, not today, but just in my past, had this image of everything being a net of energy. And someone introduced me to the Indra's net. And so when I heard, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I was reading and introduced to the mycelium network, I was like, oh my God, that's Indra's net on like a microcosm, and I was just wondering if you had any insights to that. It seems to me like Indra's net is, and then the mycelium is the earth Indra's net.
Yeah, beautiful. That's a wonderful way of putting it. Indra's net of the earth. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. And also the artwork of Alex Gray, where he just has all that.
Yeah. Alex Gray. He does capture that human network interdependence. Yes. And body-mind interdependence in his art. And who's else? There's someone else there with their hand up. I'm going to take you too, because I did 2 in the room, so we could do 2 on Zoom.
It might be me.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Willa. Lama
Hi.
Willa. As I was sitting, I was thinking about being rooted in the earth. And then as I was listening to your talk, I was cleaning the garlic and just imagining myself with these deep, fine roots that connect down into the mycelial network.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I wish you could send us one of those cloves. That looks amazing.
I wish I could. Yeah, they're nice and big.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, one more here. Yes.
Hi, thank you
Yeah.
so much for this talk today. It really resonates with me personally so much, and I'll try not to be about the self, but I am a practicing herbalist. So I have the wonderful experience of working with plants every single day in my apothecary and on my farm, and wanted to offer just some of my thoughts that might touch you. Is my master teacher and mentor taught me to slow down and thank the plant, because if we do, the plant will speak to us. And oftentimes, as individuals, we will look at a garden or a space and see the weeds. And what is our instinct as a human is to pull the weeds, because they're going to potentially starve my lettuce plant or, hinder it. But in actuality, we need to look at that as, did that weed pop up there because the plants around it are interdependent upon a nutrient that it will provide it? Or has the relationship become toxic? And that's when we may need to assist the plant kingdom in, finding a balance. And so I really try to sit with my plants and talk to them and understand what is their actual purpose. And then I would invite all of you, especially today, because you're here at Wonderwell where it's beautiful and we're surrounded by plants, to just really look at your environment, and whether you live in a city or here or anywhere, what plant seems to be in your life appearing to you repeatedly? And that could be anything. And then when you repeatedly see that plant, it's trying to speak to you. It has a message for you. And maybe that's something you may wish to consider, or to touch it, or to do research on that particular plant. And then lastly, I find it very wonderful every day to have my bare feet on the ground. And we all have heard of grounding. It's so trendy, right? But really, that physical connection with the earth really can teach us so much, even in just a few short moments. And then getting our eyes to the sun, because we're connected to all of it in the universe. And the sun actually influences us into the retina, and it helps us to connect and ground and find our sleep and our rhythms. So, and then lastly, on plants that have different properties that maybe can affect the brain outside of mycelium, there are also many plants, like particularly I'll use mugwort as an example. It's often used in sleep teas or things like that, but there's much in the history of the universe humans using that to help them deal with trauma, deal with lucid dreaming, to help expand their meditation. So there are plants that can be utilized in that manner. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you. So I think we need to wrap up now because we've reached time, but afterwards I'll stay here for a while. So if people want to come up and say hi or introduce yourself or share something that you weren't able to share in the room, please feel free. We're going to conclude with our bodhicitta dedication prayer. Bodhicitta means something like wise compassion, for those of you that are new to it. Changchu Sem Cho Rinpoche Ma Che Panam Che Jorchi Che Panyam Pa Me Pa Kong Ne Kong Du Pao. May the pure, brilliant sun of bodhicitta dawn in each and every heart and mind, dispelling the darkness of suffering and confusion unstoppably until all are fully illumined and awakened. Thanks everyone for coming today. Thank you. please join us for a potluck. Bye, everybody online. Bye bye. I see you all. Lots of love.